Welcome back, everybody, to the Growing Band Director podcast. This is episode number 71. We're very privileged today to have Dennis Llinas with us from the University of Oregon Bands. Dennis, how are you today?
I'm doing great. I'm honored to be here. Thanks for having me.
Of course. I want to thank everybody on the Patreon platform who is supporting our show for as little as $3 a month. And we are almost at 900 people on the Facebook group as well. More people, the better on that. We're going to start with some mailbag questions that people have been asking about. We have two today. The first one comes from Kayla. Kayla asks about assessments. What do teachers do for assessments in their programs? I'll throw out, and I think she mentioned that her administrators ask for a certain number of assessments and things like that, and we're all in different positions here. I do practice logs where kids are asked to practice a certain amount a week, and they get graded for that. Class rehearsal grades, concert reflections, after they have concerts and things like that, and then playing quizzes either semester or quarterly or whatever works. So that's what I do. You guys want to throw out some other things that people do, which is around the country?
What I used to do was I had a weekly test for every kid in the band, and we'd go around and we'd be assigned X number of exercises, and I had a little metal can in my front of my room, and I'd pick out a number, and then I'd call off, and I'd have another can with the names in it. I'd pull out the names, and maybe do one section each day, each week, get an assessment that way. Then we had playing assessments, and then we had recorded audition assessments twice a quarter.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I kind of did a lot of mostly the assessment thing and practice logs. So, it was interesting with the assessments. I've taught at different places, and when I taught it in Texas, they call it music pass-offs. And so they would play, but it was always short segments, so we're just going to work on this one small segment. And I think that's a good way to get your students to be successful in these assessments, not necessarily thinking they have to prepare the whole piece, but they can be successful from B to C at chord note equals 80. And that can get them going. And maybe if you have some younger developing students, they get a simplified version of it for theirs, so they can still perform the music that may be challenging some of the more proficient players. I think that might be a good balance with that.
Yeah, I think it's important for any teacher to find whatever that balance is, right? Like to hold your kids accountable for how they play, and they have to do some work. However, none of us are there about the assessments, right? It's about the making of the music with the kids. So Kayla, we would just say for all of us, we just try to find the best thing for our schools. All right, and one more. Tom wonders if he's pushing kids too hard in his program and if he will burn them out. So he talked a lot about that he's really been pushing technique, and I don't know if he meant it this way or not, but I would caution teachers not to push technique so much that you don't work on tone and sound. My philosophy is tone and sound come first, technique comes after that. And my thought was that students do need rigor. They have so many classes sometimes where they're not pushed. I think it's important that we push them as far as we can push them. But also knowing how to read your students is really important. So you don't push them enough that they're going to hate whatever you're doing, but push them to be as great as they can be. What do you guys think?
Well, from my side of the coin, tone and intonation is priority. The next thing is rhythm, because most of the pitfalls for them is they can't interpolate rhythms, and they need to know the rhythms. And as far as pushing them too far, sometimes I think what you just said, Kyle, is 100% what I think, is that you have to read your students. But I think sometimes we as teachers think we're pushing the kids too hard because we think we're working too hard, rather than realizing that the kids want to be pushed, and it's making a little more work for us. And we need to recognize the fact, is it the students that are the problem? Or is it our attitude, how the students are producing the problem? And, my piano teacher used to say, slow practice makes fast playing. So if you're all worried about a lot of fingers, well, then you're worried about a state adjudication rather than the development of your students. You need to worry about how you're developing your students as musicians.
One thing I found with students is, in terms of pushing them, if they love what they're doing, it's almost impossible to push them too hard. So if you're picking the kind of piece that they just cannot stop practicing and cannot stop playing, and the bell rings and they just keep playing it, you're not really pushing them. They start to push themselves. So I think if there's something that you really want to work on, you got to find a great piece that's going to help them develop that and give them that intrinsic motivation so that you're not the one, inciting that they start to do that within themselves. So when you're trying to figure out like what that level is that you guys are talking about, I think that's a really important component. Find the right thing that they want to practice and push themselves in. I think that'd be helpful.
And don't assume that that piece that they want to play is going to be a cheesy piece. Don't assume that it's the piece that is like a pop piece or whatever. Like just find the piece that they really love.
Mm-hmm.
I agree with that 100%. I think too often we get caught up with the fact that, oh, we got to do a pop piece to get them so they're engaged. But sometimes some of the finest repertoire is so engaging that we need to push that repertoire.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Dennis, we have so much to talk about here. First, I wanted to just I've just been checking up. I've just been Facebook stalking you is all it was. The amount of things you've been doing over like the last 6 weeks is crazy. So I just wanted to kind of, first of all, CBDNA.
Yeah.
How was that?
It was a great conference. CBDNA it's a very unique conference, especially for people that end up going to TMEA or Midwest or the state conferences. CBDNA is such a compartmentalized small group of people with this one targeted mindset of just collegiate, ensembles. But what the thing I really love the most about that is hearing new repertoire and hearing great groups. Mm-hmm. So there were quite a few people pushing the boundaries of what the rep has been. Mm-hmm. And while I don't agree with all of the programming that I heard, I was challenged to listen to some things and to learn some new rep and learn new composers that are writing, others that aren't trying to innovate. And I think it's important for, as a band directors, we're trying to figure out what we want to play. Is the composer trying to fill gaps and voids in the repertoire, or is the rep just kind of sounding the same as what we have, and so as you're a band director trying to figure out who you want to program and who you want to look at, I think that's an important question to ask yourself. Yeah.
And you probably get to connect with a lot of people that you don't see too often.
Yeah, usually it's Midwest and CPDNA whenever that happens, where I get to catch up with some of my colleagues that teach across the country, especially in the collegiate realm. In Midwest is probably the place where everybody is guaranteed to be at, right. Which is really, really nice.
I was also noticing that you just came back from Texas.
Yeah, so
the 5A All-State Band. How was
that?
Yeah,
so this has been a busy January through now, and I did this to myself in the most foolish fashion. So the first week in January, I did the Region 2 honor band, and which is Hebron, Flower Mound, Marcus, a bunch of the schools like up in that area, and it's just a killer group of kids. I mean, amazing players, and the directors were just great people and really supportive. So I had a great time with them. And incredibly talented kids. The week after, I was in El Paso conducting their honor band, which was really, really fantastic. They hosted it at UTEP, but I connected with some kids there. The week after that, I did a middle school honor band here in Salem, Oregon. And Salem is just a really concentration of powerhouse programs. I mean, we have great programs throughout our state here in Oregon, but in Salem, you have some incredible teaching happening there. And so doing the middle school there was really interesting, but great. I mean, they were really well prepared, in some ways better than some of the other bands that I do. The week after, I was hosting 8th Blackbird and Viet Quang on campus for a full week in different capacities. The week after that, I conducted the 5A All-State Band in Texas, and then I was at CBDNA. So it's just been one thing after the other. But to answer your question about the 5A band, it was a blast. They were great. They had a good time. We did this one salsa chart that I wrote. It's called Un Cafecito. I did it with them, and it features a lot of sections, and it's just a style of music that a lot of times doesn't pop up in our rep. Which is why I chose to write it, because we don't have anything salsa, and I'm Cuban, and so we were able to put together a Cuban chart, and the kids really had a good time.
What's the grade level? What's the grade level on that?
That's about a 5. A 5. It's tricky. It's got some moments that are pretty exposed, especially for horns and trombones in particular. It's pretty tricky.
I wanted to come back. You mentioned that you did the middle school honor band. So you're one of these conductors who can do it all, right? You can do the younger kids and the older kids. That's
Well,
pretty
I don't
awesome.
know if I can do it all, but I try to. I had a great time with those kids. The directors had a great experience. They loved what I was doing with them and how I was interacting with them.
Mhm.
So I think it's important. I don't do middle school bands often, but in our state, I think it's really important because recruiting is always what we're looking at.
Of course.
And if we're always trying to find the seniors that are doing great, we're recruiting completely wrong. Because the basketball coaches over at LSU, where I used to teach, they would tell us recruiting starts from the time the kids are in middle school. And I think it's important for us to think the same, who are great sixth, seventh, and eighth graders who could potentially be coming down the line. And so as I'm helping my colleagues recruit by doing these, I think it's important to do middle school as well.
And you mentioned about a lot of the strong programs in Oregon. Can you, I know I didn't prepare you for this. Can we shout out the names of some of the teachers in the area that I know you're probably going to like leave some people out that you don't mean to or whatever, but are there some people, some names we should know about for great
I don't want to get in
teachers?
the hot seat. Yeah, absolutely. I think in the state of Oregon and music education, you can't talk about it without mentioning Todd Zimbelman. So Todd teaches over at West Salem, and he is an outstanding educator. His bands are not just good; they are outstanding. As a matter of fact, Viet Quang, I took Viet to work with them. That's one thing that I do every time we have guest artists. I take them to schools or bring schools in so they can interact with them.
Mhm.
And I took Viet over to work with them on Sound and Smoke, and Viet said, "This might be the best high school band I have ever heard." And
Wow.
that's true of every time I hear Todd's band. It really is, and that incredible.
What's the school name again?
West Salem High School.
West Salem.
They're really outstanding. Yeah, but there are a lot of other good teachers. Brent Stye over at Sherwood High School is a fantastic teacher. Jeremy Zander over at Mountainside High School, which is over in Beaverton, is excellent. Louis Norfleet down at Grants Pass. That's another really fantastic program. Here in Eugene, Julie Bounds is at Sheldon High School, and another really outstanding educator. And I mean, there's so many more. Like in Salem, you can say every high school is incredible. Throughout in Southern Oregon and Medford, you can talk about North Medford High School. I mean, a lot of good programs. So it's really hard to just target some. In Portland, yeah. I have to mention, Jen Brooks, who teaches over at David Douglas. There's a lot of really good teachers in the state. But so I hope
sounds like a great place to be. That's awesome.
Absolutely, real fortunate.
Oh, that's great. I want to make sure they see this so they can see the work you're doing. I'm sure they know the work you're doing. But all right, so let's jump to the workshop. Yeah, I'm really excited for this, and we're gonna play people the trailer of this. But before we play the trailer for them, can you give us just a little bit of the genesis of the idea and what is it for people who have no idea what it is?
Yeah, so when I was teaching in my previous job, which was LSU, I was always thinking about what was going to be coming next. And so this is before COVID. We're looking at 2017, 2018. I signed up for the masterclass series that exists. Gordon Ramsay has a masterclass. Steph Curry does one. There's some on filmmaking. There's some on architecture, those. But there's a lot on cooking, and I love to cook. And so I was doing almost every cooking masterclass just to learn about smoking meats. Franklin has one. And so I was doing those, and I was like, man, I wish there was something like this for band. And I was like, interesting. Yeah, right. And I was thinking in my mind, whenever I get my next job, I thought about doing it at LSU because we had great players there. It's a great community. But I was like, this is my idea. I might want to do this wherever I go and I become, the head of a program. And so when I got the job at Oregon, I'm like, this is great because Oregon is an incredibly talented, great school of music that a lot of people just haven't heard of. And so when I was trying to figure out, okay, how do I get people to hear about what we're doing? How do I establish an identity for us? I'm not going to put out recordings that are going to, be better than the University of Texas or North Texas or, Michigan, with the level of player they have. And I'm like, well, I'm not sure I want to go that avenue because that's already covered. People are doing that really successfully. And so I was thinking, what doesn't exist? And so I was thinking, well, this masterclass series, what if we did that for band and every episode was a specific piece of music that people could do? And so I decided to call it the workshop, which is the only way to not copyright, just say the same word.
Instead of calling it the masterclass.
It's basically the same kind of idea. And so every episode is a piece of music. So episode 1 is Colonial Song. And I wanted pieces that different levels of high schools could do. So Colonial Song is definitely going to be a stretch. And so we're going to, I'll talk about the future episodes later. But so episode 1 will have a 10-minute private lesson video from the principal players in the ensemble for every instrument. So there's a 10-minute flute video, oboe, bassoon, clarinet, and so forth, all the way down the score. And basically, we pick excerpts from the piece that are particularly challenging, whether it's oboe because it starts on the low B flat, and how our oboist, combats that, or the trumpet solo or the saxophone solo. And we put the music on there, so it's kind of like a play along, thing, so that
Great.
you can literally hand it out to your kids and say your homework assignment tonight is to go to this website and work on your specific excerpts with the video and see if you can challenge yourself with that. And it was really important to me to make it free. That was another really important component, because I want to tailor this towards the programs that can't afford private lessons. So I'm from Miami. As a matter of fact, the place I'm from in Miami was a really poor income kind of place. And where I taught as well was the same kind of situation down there. And I never even contemplated private lessons. It just wasn't a thing that really happened frequently with a very, rare spattering. And so I was like, I wish this existed, because that is a way of sort of bringing private lessons to my kids in a way. So we're going to be releasing probably 2 episodes every year. And so our next episode, I know I want to do a march. Which march it's going to be, I'm not sure yet. I think I'm leaning towards His Honor, but that's something that every program is doing, a lot of the time, and we can apply march style, and so things that can apply to everything. And so, but every episode will have the lessons for every student, and then I do a lesson for the conductor, and I talk about the things that go beyond just write notes, write rhythms, how to identify pitch, all of that stuff. And I talk a little bit about why I interpret things the way I do, and why that's so important. Because a lot of times when I get brought into high schools, they tell me, okay, I got all the notes and rhythms right, and we have, we're working on pitch, we got that settled, but what else can you help us get to the next level? And that's what they always ask me for. So I try to put that in that video. And then we recorded the piece and we play through it, just so that everyone can hear, how we interpreted it. And we'll continue to do the same in future episodes.
Well, let's check out the trailer then. So everybody, check this out.
Imagine you are a band director handing out a piece of music to your ensemble. What if there was a site that had instructional videos for every instrument?
You want to make sure that you're voicing an O vowel.
And for the director on that specific piece.
Knowing how your instrument behaves is very important in the battle of intonation.
Here at the University of Oregon, we are going to make that a reality.
Blow through to that G, and we're going to utilize the play buzz play method again.
Best of all, it is 100% free.
It needs to sound snappy.
In February of 2023, we will debut episode 1 of the workshop series.
We want this to be really strong.
Episode 1 will feature Percy Granger's Colonial Song and instructional videos for every instrument, featuring the wonderful musicians here in the Oregon Wind Ensemble. And I will provide some feedback and ideas for interpretation and musicianship for the conductor.
Every flute and every player is different.
I'm thinking about a big warm tone.
It is our way of connecting musicians around the world with our program here at the University of Oregon. This is our vision. This is the workshop.
All right, so that trailer gets me pretty excited to check this out, and I'm looking forward to that a lot. Question for you, Dennis. Is it for for trumpet? Is there a video for trumpet, or is it trumpet 1 and trumpet 2 and trumpet 3? Is it for each part or just the instrument?
It's just one. And that was something that I thought about, trying to do multiple for each one. And it could get to the point where it's a little bit of overload of information. And so I figured, you can get every player in the trumpet section to get better learning one of the trumpet solos. Even if they're playing third part, there's something they can learn and they can develop it. So whether everyone is playing the same part or not, they get a chance to actually just grow by learning a different part. And learning from maybe the more advanced and older students that are probably playing those soloistic parts.
And these are all undergrads from Oregon?
It's a mix. So we have some doctoral students, some master students, and some undergrads. And a bunch of different levels. And it's interesting because we have students from everywhere. So we have a student from China that's doing one, who you hear him play and he sounds phenomenal. And English is definitely his second language. So you hear that developing, and so he speaks a lot more through the way he plays versus what he is actually saying. So there's so much to pick up from every single person and how they connect with the audience. And I think it's going to be a lot of fun.
Did they get coaching?
Yeah.
So doing this.
This went in a lot of phases. And this, my first year at Oregon was 2019. And I decided, okay, this is going to be the big project. I can't wait. We're going to film the first episode in March of 2020.
Yeah, right.
So that happened. And so in 2021, while we did do a lot of chamber music and we were outside and able to rehearse in a certain capacity, we weren't able to film another episode because I had a lot of some of my best students were choosing the remote option. They wanted to, be away because they didn't feel safe. And I get it. So finally last year we had a little bit a sense of normalcy, and I didn't film that project because I didn't know what I was going to have in terms of students. So last year was just more prepping for this year to finally release this, which has been like the baby that I've been wanting to get released for a while, So,
well, how great is that for all the Oregon kids who are doing that? Whether or not they're ed majors or performance majors or whatever major or not majors, right?
Yeah.
I mean, they have to stop and go, okay, how would I actually explain this?
I
bet you some of them have. I mean, some of them have given lessons and taught, but a lot of them have not, right? And like, how great is it for them to sit back and go, how do I actually do this, and how do I get somebody else to do this?
Well, and that's the big thing. I realized I didn't answer your question because I did coach them. So like step one was identifying who the people that were going to be doing these videos were. And I had to select very specific people because the top chair might not have been the right person for the project. And so selecting the right people and making sure they were interested. Then we would do a lesson. I say, just play me the excerpts that you have chosen. And so we pick some excerpts and I suggest some different ones, and I talk to them about phrasing. I talk to them about technique and what they're doing. And for a lot of them, I was trying to tell them, how did you get the pitch on that top space G on the bassoon down? Because that's such a sharp note. How did you do that? Like, oh, well, I just do this. I'm like, okay, that's normal for you, but that's not normal for everybody else. You need to talk about that. And they're just like, oh, really? So kind of helping them remember what it was like to not be a player that's, finishing a doctoral degree or something, And for some of them, it was really natural. And for some of them, I had to kind of remind them of some of those things. But yeah, so then after I did that one lesson with them, then they would send me a sample video where they did it. And I would critique them. Okay, we're talking too much here. We need more playing here. Focus on this. I don't understand how you did this, and that kind of thing, and just kind of coach them along. And then we did the filming during class. We emptied out the room, turned out the lights, got some spotlights, and did the filming during class, and it worked out.
Do you use this within your methods class as well? Because this would be an outstanding teaching tool within a beginning methods class for instrumental music.
Yeah, so I don't teach instrumental methods. So we have music education faculty that are teaching that class. But boy, would this be helpful because, as we all realize, it's really hard to put what you do into words, right? As band directors, this is a story of our life, right? And we say something, it doesn't work, but it makes total sense in our heads. So then we reframe it and see if it's going to work. It doesn't, and then you bring in a guest, and all of a sudden everything works. That's kind of how things work in our world. And so I was thinking about that in terms of how we communicated and how they were putting their thoughts down. But unfortunately, I don't teach the instrumental methods class. I do teach undergraduate conducting, and we talk a lot about these concepts in there. But yeah, it would be a really good project to involve them in.
Yeah, I think it not only would be great for our listeners who are teaching out there, but for our beginning teachers to see this is another way of conveying the thoughts to the kids.
What an incredible point, because so all of my graduate students that are studying conducting with me, they have to do lesson observations for different instruments. So they will talk to instruments that they're not familiar with, and they'll go to a percussion lesson to find out what does the teacher tell someone at this level and at this level. And that was crucial for me when I was in grad school, to develop my ears, to hear what Marianne Gadigian was telling the flutes, over at Texas, things like that, that really just were instrumental for me. So if you're a band director, you will hear things that could drastically improve your teaching by watching just all of these students interact, to play, number one, to hear their sound and what they're saying and how they're saying corrections.
Yes.
It will help too, because sometimes you get a kid who's really good, and some of us go, "Oh, I don't know what I could tell that kid," but we always have more that we can give them. By the way, thank you for choosing Colonial Song. I mean, what a great piece of music,
It's one of the best. It's one of the best. I struggled. I was like, what do I do? What do I do? And it's like, you can't. I mean, just one of the best.
I didn't plan this, but there is a Douglas Wagner. It's nothing. It's the melody of the original, and it's done in grade 3. If anybody checks us out and they're like, my band just can't do it, there is a grade 3 arrangement of it. That's great. So 2 questions. When is this being released? And I know that's been a little bit of a flexible date. And where is it going to be released? Where can they find it?
Yeah. So the release date, we just always said February, because our video editor is finishing the final touches on the big recording. So all the individual videos are already completed. And so what's going to happen is we're going to have a link to it in not only our Facebook page, which will be UO Bands, we'll have it there, and in our Instagram account as well. But in the University of Oregon School of Music page, there's going to be a resources tab that'll basically say the workshop, and we're going to be promoting it really heavily. So if you're following our Facebook page, that'll be the easiest way to find it, because we're going to be promoting it a ton once it gets released. Because again, I'm hoping that directors just share this, even if they don't know who I am or what our school does, or not from Oregon. Just please share this so that other people can use it, because we just wanted to get out to help people.
Well, what a great idea. It's even striking me now. How many teachers could go, wait a minute, I could do this in my high school. I could take a grade 1 piece and I could have some of my kids do this. I mean, it's a concept that can happen at almost any level.
Absolutely.
Right. I mean, if you had a middle school band and you had some 8th graders who were then going to prepare your beginning band stuff, and I mean, it's just such a great concept, and stealable for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I really recommend that everybody does. And I think that's the important part that I'm thinking about when we're selecting literature, so that as we continue on, I'm tackling literature that not only promotes living composers. That'll be the next one. Like Viet Quang was just here, and I really want to try to get Diamond Tide on the list. That's something that more programs can do, and just promoting him as a composer, because he is a rock star. So there's a lot to think about to make sure we make it accessible.
All right. I heard somebody once say, Dennis, that if you're a great band director, there are great rehearsers, and there's who are not necessarily great conductors. And then there's great conductors who are not necessarily great rehearsers, but the truly special teacher are the ones who are great rehearsers and great conductors. So I wanted to kind of turn our attention to the conducting side of things let's just say the average band director at any level, because I mean, I can speak as a band director. I have my master's degree in conducting. However, that was 20 years ago, and the amount of time I've spent with younger kids, so often we're thinking about them and not, oh, what does my pattern look like, or all these things. So, I know you've spent a lot of time observing conductors of all age groups. What are some general tips and things that you see, and some advice on the conducting side of things?
Yeah, well, I think the first thing that's important is we as teachers have to remember conducting is your instrument. The moment your hands go up and you're about to give a pattern, you are leaving a very undeniable impression on your kids that you have either no confidence, or you are very confident, that you really understand the music, or you're not sure how the next meter is going to go, or the next pattern is going to happen. Or I shouldn't look up at all because he hasn't looked up at me the whole time, or she hasn't looked up at me the whole time. And so that's an important component to never forget. How you move has become your principal instrument, and how you teach and how you communicate. So, I get told a lot, especially when I taught in Texas. I worked with a colleague who had his baton was a remote control to access a metronome at the back of the room. And that was how he conducted. And so, he would tell me, well, I don't really need to work on that. I can fix everything in class. I'm like, yeah, but what if you establish like a visual, communication with your visual language with your students, that they know that every time you do this, the notes have to be long. And then you go to your assessment and you go to a sight reading room, and you can do that, and they all of a sudden change the way they sound because they're used to seeing what you do. That's the way I approached it when I was teaching high school. We could sight read a piece, or we can be in the sight reading room or in the middle of rehearsal, and I could spare them of me cutting off and talking to say, crescendo this one bar, pencil it in, and now keep going. You know, it's like, well, what if we just didn't have to stop doing that? A lot of times my corrections are, we were playing, I'll stop and I'll say 33, something's off. Watch me again. Ready? And that's my only correction. And it challenges me as a conductor because I have to do something different at 33. And it challenges them because they realize I have to watch and make sure that I'm engaged, which in essence makes them a little more engaged audibly as well, just makes them better musicians. So I think that's an important component as to why is this important. How to do it is just make this part of the warm-up routine. You know, everything you do should change tempo, should change dynamic, and just make sure you show them what you want them to do. Say, no, I'm showing you something different. Again, don't explain what it is, just show them something different. Just show them something different. And then you start applying it to pieces, and you try to make your comments, you know, watch me in this measure, I'm going to try something different. Of course, sometimes we have to teach those rhythms, and sometimes we just have to, you know, rep something. That's normal. I mean, even I have to do that here. But I think whenever possible, try to find those opportunities, which is really an important component of it. You know,
can I sneak
but
in without
yeah.
you losing your thought? I had a great teacher named Jean Quinn who did this exercise once that I saw, and it blew my mind. She was doing the grade 2 version of Lincolnshire Posy, the second movement, and with an honor band. And the warm up that she used with the honor band was they were doing a B flat concert scale, but she changed meter every note, and they could only change on beat 1. So it was 5/4 and 2/4 and 3/4 and 4/4 and 6/4, and it was a very easy way for them to watch them. So she wasn't changing tempo, but she was changing meter. And it was a creative way of doing what you're saying, but also connecting it with a piece that they're performing.
Makes total sense. Makes total sense. And you just have to be creative about it. You know, warm-ups, you know, I always thought, even when I teach undergrad conducting, which I'm teaching right now, we create warm-up packets specific to the pieces that we're doing. And it involves some creativity, but it also is like a classroom management 101, because if I know I have to rehearse the clarinets and I have to drill something that's really tricky, that lasts for 4 measures, and I don't want the rest of the ensemble sitting around, I just make the warm-up everyone learning the things that I really have to rehearse. So imagine if you were doing that and your students were always engaged. Because I promise, if something is technically difficult for the clarinets, the tuba players are going to get better learning it. And so are the percussionists, you know, learning that on mallet. So just trying to do that. And I know that doesn't apply directly to conducting, but teaching is conducting. I think that's all, it's completely tied in to each other.
And a lot of middle school teachers do these things called companion guides, which is exactly that, right? They'll take the hard excerpts of the piece and write it out for everybody, and so everybody learns the stuff. Another thing that I do is, if you're working on something, you can ask the band to pat the beat. It's almost like they're in general music class. So they are, you know, they're patting the beat instead of just sitting there and daydreaming. You know, they do that along with them. A couple other things as you were speaking, kind of, I wrote down real quick that I wanted to mention, and I know, Jeff, you have some stuff you want to say too. I wanted to reiterate that you said, like, show something musically more than one way before you stop and ask them to change it. I mean, you can fix so many more things that way, even with simple music. Get your eyes up. You said it too. The minute you put your hands up and you start, if your eyes go down, right? And how many times do we do that even if we don't have to do it? It's just like, get the eyes.
That is a story of everybody's life. You know, I conduct some things from memory. Before, at the beginning of my career, I conducted everything from memory. Now I'm doing a little bit too much rep to be able to do that consistently now. But I'll tell you, you will be shocked at the connection you will have with your students if you just memorize a piece. And even if you think you don't have it memorized, just do a rehearsal without opening the score and just look at them. And it'll remind you, as you're just surveying the room, you'll see a bass clarinet or a random third trombone that you're like, I don't know what they're playing right now. And it reminds you to listen to, what do they sound like right now? Now, there's so many things that work well to just get away from the score. And you can, and if you stop and you keep visual communication with them, the moment you release their sound, you're like, something doesn't sound right. A kid will feel like, wow, they're stopping because I am producing something. They haven't broken eye contact with me. So I wonder what's going to come out next. And the whole rehearsal feels very engaged versus, going in the podium and staring down and looking at the answers to the test and the cheat sheet, as you will. I think it changes the whole dynamic of a rehearsal.
And your ears are wide open too.
Oh, goodness. It's so much better.
So I had a dear friend at Hofstra University, Peter Boonshaft, and Peter used to go and do clinics. And one of the things he always talked about at his clinics was that conducting a rehearsal without saying a single word and teaching the kids through your hands, like you just talked about. And I got to tell you, I hope our listeners try that, because you learn a great deal about that and learn a great deal about your students in the piece. And then secondarily, a lot of times when we go out to festivals and we watch other conductors conduct, as you said, the students want a connection with you. And if you're not looking at them, there's no learning of a musical connection going on. All there is just rote reading.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, in the way I teach conducting and I think about it is conducting is a conversation that you're having with people, as I'm doing, in the video that we have that we're putting up a Colonial song in this, like I'm conducting and I'm telling Brandon, make this note grow to that note. Sydney, this is going to be the tempo section. It's going to be slightly faster. I just take out the words, but I tell them exactly, like trombones, I would play this note long. And I literally just do the gesture and I say the sentence, and then you remove the words. And that becomes the most expressive conducting. You just start talking to people. This is what I would do here. Remember, we rehearsed this too, but you're supposed to accent this note more. Imagine what the rehearsal is going to be like if you just keep talking to them. And the conducting aspect of it, I think, just don't forget that. You're always talking and you're always communicating with the ensemble.
So as we want to work, I think one thing that as teachers, you hit on it earlier, that we don't do enough of is feel the freedom to interpret the piece of music that we're doing, whether it be a grade 1 piece or a grade 5 piece, that you can interpret it differently from the X recording that you're listening to. Can you give us some advice on what are things do we look for in order to interpret a certain way?
This is like the $1 million question, right? Because I remember when I was teaching, I was like, I wonder if I can go into 2 here, or if I can slow down. Let me see if I can find a recording that does it. You don't need validation from a recording. Let's just make that very clear. Just because you have an idea doesn't make it a good one, but it also doesn't make it a bad one. And I think you should talk to other directors to get ideas. But I go through a good lesson on this in this first workshop episode that'll come out next week, where I start talking about why I take time in certain places. And so the one general thing that I think I can share with everyone here that I think will be really helpful is I believe dynamics take time to happen. So if you really think about that and apply that to music, it does quite a bit. So even if you're thinking about, let's say, you're doing Irish tune, or actually, let's go back to Colonial song. That's what we're talking about, right? The first note of Colonial song, some people make that note last 6 beats, and some people go 2 exact beats in the tempo of the piece. I'm not sure either one is right. The correct, length of time is how long does it take for that first note to get to the dynamic where the rest of the ensemble entering will be balanced with that first chord. And that's how long that first note should be. And, when you get to later on, Granger puts these hairpins that go from piano to fortissimo to piano in 3 beats. That can't be done in a very steady tempo. And so one very general thing that I'll say about it is whenever I see a lot of dynamics on a page happening within a short span of time, I tend to find that as a really good kind of check mark to say, okay, I can probably borrow some time here so that dynamic has more time to happen and it can sound very organic, whether it's growing or moving away. I think that's one general one that I think most of us tend to shy away from because we just worried about making sure that it stays in time. But just feel the freedom to do that.
I've also found many times if you're conducting a transitional material, then that can tend to speed up as well on purpose, because it goes with the forward motion of the harmonic progression.
Absolutely. And the harmony is another one too. You even mentioned it, the cadence points, does the music sound like it's about to, finish a thought? And does it need time to finish the thought, or should it rush into the finishing of the thought? All these things just really will inform it. and just try to find those ideas, and then shoot those ideas to like the collegiate director or another director that you respect, and just say, hey, what do you think of this? Do you think this sounds like it makes sense? And just find better musicians than you, and surround yourselves with them. That's been the best thing that I've ever done for myself.
And the opposite when it comes to conducting advice, the thousands of us conductors who overconduct, right? We all have moments where we overconduct. So what's some advice? First of all, if your shoulder hurts at the end of rehearsal, you're probably overconducting.
You know, here's the funny thing about conducting, and I think everybody starts off this way, and only some of us move out of it. At the beginning, we think, if I move a lot and I am cueing everything and all of my gestures are really big, I'm a really good conductor. I thought that too. And gosh, I look back at that now, I'm like, God, I was so dumb. If you move a lot, it doesn't mean you're good. And if your movements look pretty, you can still be a terrible conductor. I know plenty of people in collegiate realms or high school or anything that are doing all of these gestures that look really beautiful, but don't make any sense with the music that's happening. So I think a great conductor is someone that looks like the music. And a lot of times it means that you barely do anything and you make everything really small, so that when you have something really important to say, you want to change it, that you want to change the sound, you do something. And all of a sudden, students will look up because something changed. But if you're doing this the whole time, you can make something larger or bigger, but this giant pattern is obfuscating everything that's happening. So if you quiet all the noise that's consistent, you know, like pattern, right, or meter, and you just show the things that you really want to change about the group, I think that'll really help. You know, and if you're thinking right now, well, my middle school band can't do that, they need me to show them tempo. Well, here's what I always counteract that. If you have a middle school band, try to change their tempo in a concert. Good luck with that one, because they're just going, you know. Tempo, we don't control really tempo anywhere. It's somewhere in the ensemble. And if we're teaching effectively, we're going to get them to realize what those things are. So, you know, try to get to the point where you can start doing that later. And if there's a tempo problem, don't conduct bigger. Tell them who you're listening to and why there's a tempo problem. Well, the tempo problem is because we're not with snare. So everyone stop, everyone listen to snare. Good. Now, can you play with them and don't conduct? And that's how I fix tempo problems with my group. I just stopped conducting, and boy, do they get better. So clearly I'm the problem. But I think that's a good tactic that we should all look at.
Yeah, I love it.
Do you find that when I was teaching, we'd go to festival twice a year, and in that festival would be the typical sight read a piece. And like you said, in the middle school, where you don't think the group would change tempo with you in the middle of a concert. And I think that's probably the best tell-all, is when you're sight reading a piece, you've not given the kids too much information and they have to use their ears, and you're changing the tempos and making the modifications, and they go with it. And I know many band directors are afraid of that sight reading thing, but I think that's probably the finest tool, because if you take what you've taught them for sight reading and transfer it into your day-to-day preparation of piece, you get a much more robust sound and a much more communicative sound between you and the kids.
Absolutely true. You know, develop a language that all of you know, that all of you speak, that it happens daily. Make sure their stands are really high so that they can see you and your hands and their music without moving their heads. That's how I always just, they were just really high, and I can just see their eyes basically, but so they can see my hands, and just make that steady every day. Every time there's a correction, you say, no, over here, watch this, you know. And if it's a tempo thing, then you say, listen to this. So, yeah.
Great.
Dennis, who are some composers that you really like?
Oh boy, that's
and don't think that you. I know I didn't prepare you for that one, but don't think, well, this one is too obvious, because somebody listening to this does not know a composer. You're going to think, you know, all at the collegiate level, but also younger bands and things like that. Just give us some names of people that come to mind.
Yeah, well, I think, you know, it's important to listen to great music, regardless of what the genre is, and regardless of what you teach. So I'll tell you one of the composers and conductors that taught me a lot about interpretation, if you're working on trying to figure out how to be more interpretive. So if you look up the Mahler-Ruckert Lieder, so it's spelled Ruckert and then Lieder. It's songs that Mahler wrote. There's a great recording with Thomas Hampson and Leonard Bernstein conducting the Vienna Philharmonic, where I saw the score, and it is the most simplistic looking thing ever. But how Leonard Bernstein interprets an accent that Mahler would put, it taught me so much about, wow, that's that big a deal. I learned so much from that. So Mahler is someone that I always listen to just develop myself and fill my musical soul. In the band, obviously, I think you're trying to ask in the band world, like what are people that we should all be listening to and doing their music. I think Viet Quang is an innovator, because if you listen to his music, he doesn't sound like everybody else. And I think that's a really important component of trying to find out who is a great composer. You know, do they sound like other people? There are other composers that are very popular that I just don't do their music because they sound like about 4 or 5 other composers. You know, so I'm not going to mention them here because I don't want to throw anybody under the bus.
Of course.
But that's just personal belief, you know. So I think Viet Quang is great because he has pieces for a bunch of different grade levels. So Rule of 3 is a good piece if you have 3 really strong percussionists but a young band. It's kind of written for that. Diamond Tide is like a 4 that's just killer, and everybody is really active. The colors are different, you know. And then he has things that are much more difficult. But I think he is excellent. That you should always be listening to. I think right now Omar Thomas is, you know, super popular and has works from a lot of different levels. I think Omar is an important person to know who he is, not just because he's a great human being, but also because he's an incredible composer. And again, his music sounds very unique. That's really important. There's a lot of others that most of the rep that I do are things that are a lot more difficult, that I think, you know, are tricky. But Kimberly Archer is another one that I just did a piece of hers when I did the Allstate Band, which is a lot of fun. Humoresque was the one that I ended up doing. I think she has a great sound, and some of the symphonies that she's doing is just really innovative, really fun. So those are some that I would mention, you know, in what we're doing now. But I think, you know, always listen to like some of the composers that are out there, like Will Healy. Will Healy is a Juilliard grad who is just writing music where he mixes hip hop with band stuff, you know, and he's in a whole different league and trying to see what's going to happen next with music. I think that's important. There's a composer named Angelica Negron. She had never written a band piece until I commissioned her to do one. So we're finally going to premiere it next year. And she's living in New York, an incredible composer, and very different, very unique sound. So I think everybody, you know, as you're trying to find the people that are winning awards, the people that are, you know, they're getting the Pulitzers or whatever. And if they don't have a band piece, find out who they're hanging out with, because eventually you'll find somebody else that has written for our medium. And that's how you find good music.
What did you do for literature at some of the honor bands you've done in the last month or so?
Yeah. So for the one I did in January, we opened with Dance Diabolique. There's a Takahashi transcription. It's by Helmsberger, and it's a Takahashi transcription, which is fun. It sounds a lot harder than what it is. But it's a really fun kind of march substitute with some really fun harmonies and so forth. The second piece, the middle one we did there, was the Adagio from Spartacus by Khachaturian. There's a great, first of all, that piece is iconic. If you don't know it, listen to it as soon as you can. And there's a great transcription by a guy named Jacco Nefs, Jacco and Nefs. You can only get it through his site, and he's in the Netherlands. So his website, don't get intimidated by the fact that it's not in English. It's easy to find it. You communicate with him. It's really easy to get on. He has great transcriptions. He has a Firebird one too. But we did the Adagio from Spartacus, and then we closed with Come Sunday. It was a really good group. We only had 2 days. Like I said, this is some of the best programs that we did. And then I went to El Paso after that, and so for that one, I think we opened with Florentiner. Because I want something a little different. I know we closed with Danzón number 2, Marquez, because that's the population in El Paso is almost all Mexican, and Marquez is an incredible Mexican composer.
Which arrangement of that did you do?
We did the nickel version, but from what I hear, And I haven't seen it yet. Marquez has actually done his own transcription for band. Which is something that a lot of us don't know. And I was just finding out about that the other day. So I need to check that out because there are some percussion things that are not idiomatic and incorrect in the ones that I saw. So I'm curious to see Marquez's transcription himself. I did those with the Allstate Band. We did. There's a transcription. I like transcriptions, right? I just want to do great music, and so we did Mars and Jupiter from the planets on that one. We did a salsa piece that I wrote called Un Cafecito with the Allstate Band. We did the trio from Der Rosenkavalier. It's by Strauss, of course. And there's a good transcription by Jimmy Reynolds. Although there's a massive errata sheet. If you do it, contact me. I will give you the errata sheet. There are a lot of mistakes, but the music is just epic. And we opened with the Kimberly Archer Humoresque. So it's just, I don't think I repeated anything on any of those honor bands that I did at the beginning of this year. Which is really
it made it harder for you. What about the middle school group? Did you mention the groups what you did for the middle school group?
Yeah, we did Tripwire by Jared Hall, I think it was. We did a piece called Rampage, which was a Randall Standridge tune. I don't remember. Yeah, that's okay. I'd have to look through my scores. I've conducted about 35 pieces in 2 months, so I don't remember exactly. But I'll find out and I'll email it to you.
Great.
Yeah.
What else are you excited about coming up?
Ooh. So we have had projects every term here. So we're in the quarter system here. So every quarter, we've had a really fun project. So for us, our first concert, we did the whole planets on a concert with like a bunch of visual effects and everything, which was a lot of fun. Our second concert, we recorded the workshop. In February, we hosted Eighth Blackbird and Via Kwong. And for our next concert, which happens in 2 weeks, we're doing the world premiere of a euphonium concerto that was commissioned by Hiram Diaz. He's a euphonium player in the President's Own Marine Band. Wow. And Hiram is going to be here just working with our tuba and euphonium studio. And he happens to be from Miami, and I'm from Miami. And Hiram happens to be Cuban, and I happen to be Cuban. And when he was visiting, getting ready for his residency, he heard us doing a salsa chart that I wrote. And he said, and we were talking about a euphonium concerto for him to do with us. And he said, can you write me something that sounds like that? Because we don't have it in our literature. And I'm like, oh, this is one of the best euphonium players in the world asking you to write. I'm like, of course, I'm going to figure out how to do it. So we did. So we're going to do the world premiere of that in March, as well as John Adams' Grand Pianola music, which is going to be a killer piece. And then in April, we're doing a tour to some high schools in Oregon with the whole wind ensemble. And then in May, we're doing a conducting workshop, and Jerry Junkin's coming in. So he'll guest conduct on the concert and then work with the participants. So, I mean, we have something that's really bringing in great people in front of the students and us connecting with audiences every term, every month, basically.
I wanted to connect more about that conducting workshop earlier when we were talking about conducting, but teachers from all around the world can come to this conducting workshop, right? No matter the level of conductor they think they are, they will obviously get something out of it. So can you give us the pitch why we need some more people coming to that?
Yeah. The way we structure ours is we want educators to come. This isn't like a grad school shopping, which happens a lot of conducting workshops. This is meant for anybody that's just, I need to get better. I need to just expose myself to my ears, to great playing. I want some people working with me. And so our workshop is structured for that. So we have like 3 airs from Gloucester, some grade 3 rep on there. We have some, I think it goes as difficult as His Honor March. I mean, it's stuff that's just not that difficult. And we have some chamber music on there for anybody that wants to do it, but it's not necessary. We have some holes for a suite. So we have the repertoire that goes a really wide gamut of ability so that someone can do something that they can take back and then actually do with their students, whether they're teaching middle school or high school, or in their looking for graduate school and graduate studies. So that's an important component of that for us. And we also do some lecture sessions. So this year, I think what we're going to do for our lecture sessions is get some of our applied faculty to talk about common mistakes they hear in their younger students and how they fix it. So like our trumpet professor, Mickey Sasaki, will talk about when your trumpets sound like this, it's because of this and this. So this is how I'm going to fix it. This is what the sound is. This is what you should do. These are exercises, or this is what the correction is. And I think that's an important component of that workshop for us. And we always invite a guest. This year will be Jerry Junkin. Last year was Cynthia Johnson-Turner. Next year we're working on Steve Davis. So we're going to have a lot of different people in front of them that have all taught and are all great educators. So this year we actually filled up for the workshop, which is great. But if you want to come to it and you're like, well, I'm not sure I'm ready to conduct, there are always observer positions for these too, that are way cheaper, and it gives you a chance to see everything and to say, okay, I can do this. And I think that's where everybody should put themselves. I can do this. We don't ever make anyone feel bad. Everyone is where they're at, and we just start working with you from wherever you are to help you just progress. So that with things that you can take back home.
It's so great. I have a little story to tell. 2010, my wife and I went down to UNT and we did their conductor's collegium. I still don't know how that's a word, but they use it. And of course, I'm from Maine, and we show up in the June heat, and it was like 10 million degrees, whatever, right? So of course, I had to wear a dress shirt that was like not too hot. So of course, I wore a straight white short sleeve dress shirt, and I'm in front of the UNT Wind Symphony, and there's Corporon and Alan McMurray, who was going to work with me, and then Dennis Fisher is up top with the entire gallery, and I'm there in the white shirt. So I'm the guy who they got to teach never wear a white shirt when you're going to conduct. I was like, okay, that was fun, but the just putting yourself out there and doing that experience, I basically came home. If I could put it in one sentence, I basically came home and realized I need to use more ictus and less motion. So those conducting workshops are great, whether it's yours or other ones. I can't encourage that enough for people.
They're all over the place. So yeah, don't feel like you have to travel far to do them. They're all over and all great.
Well, Dennis, thank you. Do you have any closing advice for any band directors who are just looking to get better?
Yeah, I think the most important thing that you can do is surround yourself with a network of people that are better than you. I can't stress that enough. If you are teaching in an area and this one legend director that's a little bit out of the way, go watch them teach, get in touch with them and say, hey, can I just watch you, or spend a day with you? That's okay to do, even if you are in your 30th year of teaching, or in your second year of teaching. Don't be embarrassed to ask for help. Surround yourself with the people that you really want to emulate, that you really want to get to be a part of what you're doing. And you'll see that'll start to transfer to you. And as a matter of fact, everybody usually is always willing to help others. Mm-hmm. And we don't get territorial about it. We just want to share ideas. We want people to be successful. And I think people should just not be intimidated for asking for that help, and just surrounding themselves with people that are really excellent at what they do and who they want to be like.
Words to live by.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
We sincerely appreciate you taking your valuable time and listening to the Growing Band Director podcast. Your students are very lucky to have a band director like you. If you have any suggestions for episode topics or think you have an area of expertise to share on a show with us, please reach out. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe. And if you want to help spread the word, please give us a 5-star review and tell your band director friends to subscribe as well. We're available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, our YouTube channel, and wherever you listen to podcasts. Thanks for listening to The Growing Band Director. See you next week.